The delivery boy's day began like any other. He woke up early in the morning before the sun had fully risen in a small rented room on the edge of the city. The room was quiet, except for the sound of traffic slowly starting outside. He washed his face, put on his worn but clean uniform, and tied his shoelaces carefully. There was nothing special planned for the day, just another list of deliveries, just another routine. His name was Arav. He was 22 years old and had been working as a delivery boy for almost 3 years. The job paid enough to cover food, rent, and a little money to send back home. People usually did not look at him for more than a second. To most, he was just another delivery boy, someone who came, handed over a package, and left. Arav had learned to accept that. That morning, his supervisor handed him a list of locations. One of them stood out. A famous music academy in the city center. Arav had heard of the place before. It was known for producing talented musicians, especially pianists. Rich students, big halls, shiny instruments, everything about it sounded far away from his own life. Still, it was just another delivery to him. He loaded the cleaning supplies onto his bike and started riding. As he moved through busy streets, his mind wandered. Music had always been a quiet part of his life. As a child, he used to stop outside a small music shop near his home, listening to melodies coming from inside. He never owned an instrument, he never took lessons. But music stayed with him, living silently in his heart. When Arav reached the academy, he slowed down. The building was large and beautiful, with tall glass doors and clean white walls. It looked more like a palace than a school. He parked his bike outside and picked up the delivery boxes. For a moment, he felt nervous. Places like this always made him feel small, but he took a deep breath and walked in. Inside, the air felt different. It was quiet but alive. Soft piano music echoed through the halls, flowing from different rooms. Arav's footsteps sounded loud against the polished floor. Students passed by him, dressed neatly, carrying music sheets and talking confidently. No one paid attention to him. He followed the directions given by the receptionist and walked deeper into the building. As he moved, the music became clearer. It wasn't just noise, it was emotion. One melody in particular caught his attention. It came from a large hall with open doors. Arav slowed down without realizing it. Inside the hall stood a grand piano shining under warm lights. A group of students were seated nearby, and at the center was a teacher guiding them. Arav stopped at the door. He knew he shouldn't stare, but something pulled him in. The piano looked almost alive, as if it was waiting to be touched. For a few seconds, Arav forgot where he was. He forgot the boxes in his hands. The music reminded him of late nights when he would tap melodies on a broken table back home, pretending it was a keyboard. No one ever knew about that part of him. It was his secret. A voice suddenly broke his thoughts. Someone cleared their throat. Arav realized he was standing still. Embarrassed, he quickly looked down and stepped aside. He reminded himself why he was there. He was not a student. He was not a musician. He was just a delivery boy doing his job. He delivered the boxes to the storage room as instructed. The staff member signed the papers without looking at his face. Arav nodded politely and turned to leave. His job was done. He should have walked out and moved on to the next delivery. But as he walked back through the hall, the piano music stopped. The silence felt heavy. Arav glanced once more toward the piano. He didn't know why his heart felt restless. Something about that place, that instrument, made the day feel different from all the others. For the first time in a long while, Arav felt a strange mix of fear and hope. He didn't understand it yet, but this ordinary delivery was slowly becoming something else. Something unexpected. Something that would change his life in ways he could never imagine. And without knowing it, Arav had just stepped into a moment that would turn an ordinary job into an extraordinary day. The large hall slowly filled with sound again as the class continued. The teacher stood near the grand piano, calm and confident, her posture straight and her voice clear. She had spent many years teaching music and was well respected in the academy. Her students admired her skills and feared her sharp ears. She could hear even the smallest mistake, and she never missed a chance to correct it. The students sitting around the piano came from different wealthy families. Most of them had been learning music since childhood. For them, the piano was not just an instrument, it was a symbol of pride. They spoke about concerts, competitions, and future performances as if success was already promised to them. Their confidence filled the room. Arav stood near the side of the hall, waiting for the right moment to leave quietly. He did not want to interrupt the class. He kept his head low, holding the empty boxes in his hands. To the students, he was just part of the background, like the walls or the chairs. One of the students, a young boy in a neat blazer, noticed Arav standing there. He whispered something to the girl sitting next to him and smiled. The girl glanced at Arav, then quickly looked away, hiding a small laugh. Soon, a few more students noticed him. Their eyes followed him with curiosity, not kindness. The teacher continued speaking about technique and discipline. She explained how true music required years of practice and sacrifice. Talent alone is never enough, she said firmly. Without training, music is nothing but noise. Her words echoed through the hall. Arev felt those words deeply, though he knew they were not meant for him. He shifted his weight, feeling out of place. He reminded himself again that he did not belong there. This was their world, not his. The teacher then asked one of the students to play a piece. The student walked confidently to the piano and began. The notes were clean and correct, but something felt missing. The teacher stopped him midway and corrected his posture, his timing, his touch. The student nodded quickly, clearly used to such criticism. As the class continued, the students began to feel comfortable again. Their quiet laughter returned. Their confidence grew, and slowly the attention in the room turned back to Arev. One student leaned forward and spoke softly but loud enough for others to hear. "Why is he still standing here?" he asked with a smirk. Another student replied, "Maybe he wants to listen, or maybe he thinks he can play." A few students laughed under their breath. Arev's face grew warm. He could hear them, but he pretended not to. His fingers tightened around the boxes. He wished he could disappear. At the same time, a strange feeling rose inside him, not anger, not sadness, but something heavier. It was the feeling of being judged without being known. The teacher finally noticed the whispers. She turned her head and followed the student's gaze until her eyes landed on Arev. She looked at him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Yes?" she asked, her voice polite but firm. "Is there something you need?" Arev panicked. "No, ma'am," he said quickly. "I was just leaving." He bowed his head slightly and took a step back. Before he could leave, one of the students spoke again, this time louder. "Ma'am, he's been staring at the piano," the student said with a teasing tone. "Maybe he wants to try playing." The room filled with soft laughter. Arev froze. His heart began to beat faster. He felt exposed, like everyone could see straight through him. The teacher raised an eyebrow. She looked at Arev again, then at the piano, then back at the students. A small smile appeared on her face, not a kind one, but an amused one. "This is a serious class," she said. "Playing the piano is not a joke." She paused for a moment, then added lightly, "But since you all seem so curious." She turned to Arev. "Do you play?" she asked. Arev swallowed hard. His voice came out low. "No, ma'am," he said. "I've never learned." The teacher nodded as if that confirmed what she already believed. The students smiled, feeling satisfied. "This place is built on years of training," the teacher said, looking at the class. "Not everyone can understand that." Then she looked back at Arev. "You may go." Arev nodded and turned away. His chest felt tight. The judgment in the room was clear. To them, he was only a delivery boy, someone who could never belong in a room full of confidence and talent. As he walked toward the exit, the sound of quiet laughter followed him. But none of them realized that behind his silence, something powerful was waiting. And the room full of judgment was about to face a truth it never expected. Arev had almost reached the door when the teacher's voice stopped him again. It was not loud, but it was clear enough to cut through the quiet laughter in the room. "Wait," she said. Arev froze. His hand was already on the door handle. Slowly, he turned around. All eyes were on him now. The students straightened in their seats, curious and excited, as if they were about to watch something entertaining. The teacher looked at the class and sighed softly. "Since everyone seems so interested," she said, "let's settle this properly." Her tone was calm, but there was a hint of humor in it. "Music is not something you play without training. It takes years of discipline." She then looked directly at Arev. "Young man," she said, "you don't play the piano, correct?" Arev nodded. "Yes, ma'am, I don't." A few students smiled, already sure of what would happen next. One of them whispered, "Then why is he standing here?" Another quietly laughed. The teacher crossed her arms and looked at the piano for a moment. Then, with a small laugh, she said something that shocked everyone. "If you play this piano," she said casually, "I'll marry you." The room went silent for half a second and then burst into laughter. Some students laughed openly, others covered their mouths. A few clapped their hands as if it were a joke worth celebrating. To them, it was funny. A delivery boy playing the piano? Impossible. Arev felt the words hit him like a sudden wind. His face turned pale. He knew the teacher was joking, but the laughter made it feel heavy. It wasn't just a joke, it was a challenge wrapped in mockery. "I'm sorry," Arev said softly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." He took another step toward the door, but something unexpected happened. The teacher noticed his expression. For a brief moment, her smile faded. She saw not confidence, not pride, but embarrassment mixed with something deeper. Still, she didn't stop. "Well," she said, trying to keep the mood light, "you can try if you want. Don't worry, we all know how this will end." The students leaned forward, excited now. This was turning into entertainment. Arev stood still. His heart was beating loudly in his chest. Every part of him told him to leave, to walk away and forget this moment forever. But another part of him, the part that listened to music outside shop windows, the part that tapped melodies on tables late at night, was awake. "I can't," he thought. "I shouldn't." But his feet didn't move. The teacher gestured toward the piano. "Go on," she said. "Just one touch, you'll see it's not that easy." The room waited, silence filled the space again. Arev slowly placed the boxes on the floor. His hands were shaking slightly. He walked toward the piano, each step feeling heavier than the last. The piano looked even bigger up close. Its black surface reflected his face, nervous, unsure, and completely out of place. He sat down on the piano bench. It felt strange, unfamiliar. The students watched closely, some smiling, some whispering. The teacher stood with her arms crossed, confident and relaxed. Arev placed his fingers gently above the keys. He closed his eyes for a moment. In his mind, he was no longer in the academy. He was back in his small room, tapping rhythms in the dark. He remembered melodies he had heard long ago. Sounds that stayed with him even when life was hard. The room was completely silent now. He pressed the first key. The sound was soft, unsure, but real. A few students exchanged looks. This wasn't noise, it wasn't random. Arev played another note, then another. Slowly, a melody began to form. It was simple at first, but it carried emotion. His fingers moved carefully as if they remembered something his mind had never been taught. The teacher's expression changed. She straightened slightly, her eyes narrowing, not in anger but in focus. The laughter stopped. Arev continued playing. The melody grew stronger, deeper. His hands moved with growing confidence. The piano responded, filling the hall with sound that felt honest and alive. No one spoke. No one laughed. The joke was no longer funny. Something real was happening. And in that moment, everyone in the room realized they were witnessing something they never expected, a delivery boy sitting at a grand piano turning laughter into silence. The melody continued to flow through the hall, growing richer with every passing second. Arev's fingers moved more freely now, no longer stiff with fear. The piano no longer felt like a stranger to him. It felt like an old friend he had finally met again after many years. Each key he pressed carried emotion, hope, pain, struggle, and quiet dreams that had lived inside him for a long time. The students sat completely still. Some of them leaned forward without realizing it. Others slowly lowered their hands from their mouths. The room that had been full of laughter only moments ago was now silent, as if even breathing might disturb the music. The teacher's confident posture slowly softened. She took a small step closer to the piano, her eyes fixed on Arev's hands. At first, she tried to find mistakes. She listened carefully, expecting wrong notes or poor technique. But instead, she heard something rare, feeling. The rhythm was natural, the timing sincere. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Arev's mind was no longer aware of the people watching him. He wasn't thinking about judgment or laughter anymore. He played the way he had always imagined, freely, emotionally, without fear. Every note was a piece of his story, the long nights, the silent dreams. The music he carried inside without ever being allowed to share it. Some of the students began to feel uncomfortable, not because the music was bad, but because it was too real. They had practiced for years, memorizing notes, following rules. Yet this delivery boy with no training was touching something they had not. One student swallowed hard. Another slowly wiped their eyes, surprised by their own reaction. They didn't understand how it was possible, but they could feel it. The teacher's face changed completely now. The amused smile was gone. In its place was shock mixed with respect. She had spent her life teaching music, but this moment reminded her of something she had forgotten, that music was not only about lessons and discipline, but also about soul. Arev reached a softer part of the melody. His hand slowed, his touch became gentle. The sound felt fragile, like a quiet confession. The hall seemed to breathe with him. Then slowly he played the final note. The sound faded into silence. For a few seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with emotion. It was the kind of silence that only comes after something powerful. Arev lowered his hands and opened his eyes. His heart was still racing. He finally looked around the room. Every face was different now. The students who had laughed earlier avoided his eyes. Some looked ashamed. Others looked amazed. A few looked confused, as if their understanding of talent had just been shaken. The teacher took a deep breath. She did not speak immediately. She walked closer to Arev and looked at him carefully, as if seeing him for the first time. "Where did you learn to play like that?" she asked quietly. Arev shook his head. "I didn't learn, ma'am," he said honestly. "I just listen and I feel." The teacher nodded slowly. Her throat felt tight. She realized how wrong she had been to judge so quickly. Her joke echoed in her mind, now sounding foolish and cruel. The room was still waiting. The teacher turned to the students. "Class dismissed," she said softly. The students stood up slowly, still processing what they had just witnessed. They walked out of the hall in silence, their confidence replaced by deep thought. Arev stood up from the bench, unsure of what to do next. He felt exposed, vulnerable, but also strangely lighter. The teacher looked at him again. "Stay," she said. Arev hesitated, then nodded. Something had changed in that room, something that could not be taken back. The laughter was gone, and in its place respect had quietly taken root. Arev stood near the piano, unsure of where to place his hands or even his eyes. The hall felt different now. The same walls, the same lights, the same piano, but the air had changed. Moments ago, he was invisible. Now he felt seen in a way that made him uncomfortable and proud at the same time. The teacher walked slowly around the piano, her footsteps soft against the floor. She was thinking deeply. Years of experience told her she had just witnessed something rare. Not polished technique, not trained perfection, but raw musical instinct. The kind that could not be taught easily. "You said you never learned," she said again, her voice calm but serious. "No lessons at all." Arev nodded. "No ma'am, I never had the chance." She studied his face. There was no arrogance there, no desire to impress, only honesty. "Why music?" she asked. Arev hesitated. No one had ever asked him that before. "Because it listens," he said quietly. "When I play, I feel like someone understands me." The teacher felt a strange tightness in her chest. She had taught many students who wanted trophies, applause, and fame. This boy wanted understanding. She motioned for him to sit again. "Play once more," she said. "Anything you want." Arev looked surprised. "Are you sure, ma'am?" "Yes," she replied. "This time play for yourself." He sat down again, calmer now. His fingers touched the keys with more confidence. The melody he played was different, slower, deeper. It sounded like a journey. Like a life filled with struggle but guided by hope. As he played, the teacher closed her eyes. She remembered why she became a musician in the first place, not for status, not for respect, but for moments like this. When he finished, she clapped softly. It was not loud, but it was sincere. "You have natural ability," she said, "rare ability." Arev lowered his head. "Thank you, ma'am." She took a deep breath. "What you heard earlier," she continued. "What I said about marrying you, it was a joke, a careless one." Arev smiled slightly. "I know, ma'am. But jokes can hurt," she said honestly, "and today I was wrong." Arev looked up, surprised. "I judged you without knowing you," she said, "and I allowed others to laugh." Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed regret. "For that, I am sorry." The word sorry echoed louder than applause ever could. Arev felt something shift inside him. He had faced judgment all his life, but very few people admitted their mistakes. "It's okay," he said gently. "I'm used to it." "That should never be something someone gets used to," she replied. She walked to her desk and picked up a notebook. "Tell me about your life," she said. "Not everything, just enough." Arev spoke about his family, his small hometown, the financial struggles, and how he worked long hours. He spoke simply without bitterness. Music had always been his escape. The teacher listened carefully. With every word, her respect for him grew. "You know," she said finally, "this academy is not only for the rich. Talent deserves a place, no matter where it comes from." Arev's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said slowly, "I want to help you." She explained that the academy had limited scholarship opportunities. They were rare and competitive, but sometimes rules needed to bend for truth. "You won't become a professional overnight," she said honestly. "It will be hard, discipline, practice, failure." Arev nodded. "I'm not afraid of hard work." She smiled at that. "I believe you." She extended her hand. "If you're willing to learn, I'm willing to teach." Arev looked at her hand, then shook it. His grip was firm, his eyes shining, not with pride but with gratitude. For the first time in his life, someone had not just seen his struggle, but believed in his future. As Arev left the academy that day, the sun felt brighter. The streets felt different. He was still a delivery boy. Nothing had changed on paper, but inside him something powerful had begun. A door that had always been closed was now slightly open, and he was ready to walk through it. The days that followed felt unreal to Arev. His life had not changed on the outside. He still woke up early, wore the same uniform, and rode his bike through the same crowded streets. He still delivered packages, smiled politely, and stayed invisible to most people. But inside, everything was different. A quiet excitement lived in his chest, mixed with fear and hope. He kept thinking about the teacher's words, "If you're willing to learn, I'm willing to teach." On his third day after the incident, Arev returned to the academy not as a delivery boy but as a student. He stood outside the building for a long time before going in. The same glass doors, the same white walls. But now he felt like he was stepping into a new life. The teacher met him near the entrance. She handed him a simple schedule and showed him a small practice room. There was an old upright piano inside. It wasn't shiny or perfect, but to Arev it was beautiful. "This will be your space," she said, "for now." Arev nodded, unable to speak. The first lesson was hard, very hard. His fingers hurt. His posture felt wrong. Reading music notes was confusing. Things that came naturally to trained students felt completely new to him. The teacher corrected him again and again. She was patient but strict. "This is discipline," she said. "Talent opens the door. Discipline keeps you inside." At the end of the lesson, Arev felt exhausted, but he also felt alive. Every day after work he returned to the academy, sometimes late, sometimes tired, but he never missed a day. He practiced for hours, repeating the same exercises until his hands ached. When the building grew quiet and the lights dimmed, he stayed. Music was no longer just a feeling, it was becoming a skill. Other students began to notice him again. This time there was no laughter, only whispers. "That's the delivery boy," one said. "No," another replied, "he's a student now." Some students felt uncomfortable, others felt curious. A few felt threatened. One afternoon, a student approached him during a break. "How did you get in here?" he asked, not unkindly but confused. Arev answered honestly, "I just played." The student nodded slowly. "I've been playing for 10 years. Arev didn't know what to say. "I'm still learning," he replied. At home, things were not easy. Arev practiced on a wooden table when he couldn't reach the academy. His neighbors complained about the tapping. His hands were sore, his sleep was short, his money was tight, but he never thought of quitting. Some nights doubt returned. He wondered if he truly belonged, if this chance would disappear just as suddenly as it came. On one such night, he stayed late at the academy. The teacher heard music coming from the practice room. She stopped outside the door and listened. Arev was struggling through a piece, stopping again and again. Each mistake frustrated him, but he kept going. No anger, no excuses, just effort. The teacher smiled quietly. The next week she made an announcement in class. "There will be a small internal performance," she said. "Nothing grand. Just for growth." The room buzzed with excitement and fear. She looked directly at Arev. "You will play too." The room fell silent. Arev felt his stomach tighten. "Me." "Yes," she said, "it's time." That night Arev could not sleep. His hands shook as he imagined the stage, the eyes, the judgment returning. Old fears knocked on his door. But then he remembered the first time he touched the piano. The silence, the honesty. He practiced harder than ever. The day of the performance arrived. Students dressed neatly. Parents filled the small hall. The piano stood under bright lights. Arev waited backstage wearing a borrowed shirt that didn't quite fit. His heart pounded. He heard his name called. As he walked toward the piano, he felt the weight of every step. But when he sat down and placed his fingers on the keys, something familiar returned. The fear faded. The music began. And once again, Arev stopped being a delivery boy, a poor student, or an outsider. He was just a musician, finally learning how to become who he always was. The days that followed felt unreal to Arev. His life had not changed on the outside. He still woke up early, wore the same uniform, and rode his bike through the same crowded streets. He still delivered packages, smiled politely, and stayed invisible to most people. But inside, everything was different. A quiet excitement lived in his chest, mixed with fear and hope. He kept thinking about the teacher's words, "If you're willing to learn, I'm willing to teach." On his third day after the incident, Arev returned to the academy, not as a delivery boy, but as a student. He stood outside the building for a long time before going in. The same glass doors, the same white walls. But now he felt like he was stepping into a new life. The teacher met him near the entrance. She handed him a simple schedule and showed him a small practice room. There was an old upright piano inside. It wasn't shiny or perfect, but to Arev it was beautiful. "This will be your space," she said, "for now." Arev nodded, unable to speak. The first lesson was hard, very hard. His fingers hurt. His posture felt wrong. Reading music notes was confusing. Things that came naturally to trained students felt completely new to him. The teacher corrected him again and again. She was patient but strict. "This is discipline," she said. "Talent opens the door, discipline keeps you inside." At the end of the lesson, Arev felt exhausted, but he also felt alive. Every day after work, he returned to the academy. Sometimes late, sometimes tired, but he never missed a day. He practiced for hours, repeating the same exercises until his hands ached. When the building grew quiet and the lights dimmed, he stayed. Music was no longer just a feeling, it was becoming a skill. Other students began to notice him again. This time there was no laughter, only whispers. "That's the delivery boy," one said. "No," another replied, "he's a student now." Some students felt uncomfortable, others felt curious. A few felt threatened. One afternoon, a student approached him during a break. "How did you get in here?" he asked, not unkindly but confused. Arev answered honestly, "I just played." The student nodded slowly. "I've been playing for 10 years. Arev didn't know what to say. "I'm still learning," he replied. At home, things were not easy. Arev practiced on a wooden table when he couldn't reach the academy. His neighbors complained about the tapping. His hands were sore, his sleep was short, his money was tight, but he never thought of quitting. Some nights doubt returned. He wondered if he truly belonged, if this chance would disappear just as suddenly as it came. On one such night he stayed late at the academy. The teacher heard music coming from the practice room. She stopped outside the door and listened. Arev was struggling through a piece, stopping again and again. Each mistake frustrated him, but he kept going. No anger, no excuses, just effort. The teacher smiled quietly. The next week, she made an announcement in class. There will be a small internal performance, she said. Nothing grand, just for growth. The room buzzed with excitement and fear. She looked directly at Arav. You will play too. The room fell silent. Arav felt his stomach tighten. Me. What? Yes, she said, it's time. That night, Arav could not sleep. His hands shook as he imagined the stage, the eyes, the judgment returning. Old fears knocked on his door. But then he remembered the first time he touched the piano. The silence, the honesty, he practiced harder than ever. The day of the performance arrived, students dressed neatly. Parents filled the small hall, the piano stood under bright lights. Arav waited backstage wearing a borrowed shirt that didn't quite fit. His heart pounded. He heard his name called. As he walked toward the piano, he felt the weight of every step. But when he sat down and placed his fingers on the keys, something familiar returned. The fear faded. The music began. And once again, Arav stopped being a delivery boy, a poor student, or an outsider. He was just a musician, finally learning how to become who he always was. The night after the performance was quiet, but Arav could not sleep. The applause still echoed in his mind, not as noise but as proof. Proof that the moment he once thought was impossible had actually happened. He lay on his thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how one ordinary delivery had changed the direction of his life. The next morning, everything felt normal again. He woke up early, prepared for work, and rode his bike through the same streets. People passed him without looking twice. The world had not changed, but Arav had. When he reached the academy that evening, the teacher called him into her office. She had a calm smile on her face and a folder in her hands. We've discussed your situation, she said. It won't be easy, but we want to support you. She explained that the academy had approved a long-term scholarship for him. His classes would continue, his practice hours would increase, and he would be given access to proper instruments. In return, he would need to maintain discipline, commitment, and balance his work life carefully. Arav listened quietly. When she finished, he stood up and bowed his head. Thank you, he said. His voice shook slightly. It was not excitement, it was gratitude. From that day on, his life became harder in a new way. His schedule was tight, work during the day, practice in the evening, study late into the night. His fingers often ached, his back hurt. Some days doubt returned. There were moments when he failed badly, pieces he couldn't master, techniques that frustrated him, performances where he made mistakes. But this time he didn't run away. He remembered the laughter from that first day not with pain but as fuel. Months passed. Arav improved steadily. His music gained structure without losing emotion. Teachers noticed his progress. Students no longer saw him as the delivery boy. He became the pianist who never gave up. One evening after a long practice, the teacher sat beside him. You know, she said softly, that sentence I said about marriage, it was careless. Arav smiled, but it changed my life. She smiled too, then maybe mistakes can create miracles. Years later, Arav stood on a different stage. Bigger lights, larger audience. His name printed on the program, not his job, not his background. Before touching the keys, he closed his eyes. He remembered the small room, the broken table, the quiet dreams. Then he played. The music was strong, controlled, and full of emotion. The audience listened, just like that first silent room long ago. When the final note faded, the applause rose again, louder than ever. But this time, Arav did not feel surprised. He felt ready, because success did not come from a joke or a challenge or a miracle. It came from one simple truth: never judge a life by the uniform it wears, and never silence a dream before it has a chance to play.